In this section, we will look at some of the procedures used to troubleshoot a low power complaint or a hard starting complaint when there is no fault code logged in the ECM memory. Click on the Available section to continue. Air in the fuel lines must be purged from the system to start the engine. This situation can occur if the engine is run out of fuel or when the high-pressure fuel lines are removed. Momentarily cranking the engine starts a 25-second cycle of the fuel lift pump. This feature can be used to check the operation of the lift pump or to fill the low-pressure side of the fuel system after service. The fuel lift pump forces the air out of the low-pressure side of the fuel system through the overflow valve vent and out fuel return line. Repeat this process until the air is purged from the low-pressure side of the fuel system. To bleed the high-pressure fuel line, you must crack the fitting on at least 2 high-pressure lines and crank the engine to bleed the air from the high-pressure side of the system. Tighten the fittings when a steady stream of fuel is seen at the fitting in the cylinder head. Continue to bleed air from the remaining high-pressure fuel lines until the engine starts. Once the engine is running, the system will purge air through the injectors. Momentarily accelerating the engine will speed up the air purging process. The injector and rods have been designed so that the injectors can be removed without disturbing the rockers. To remove the injector, first remove the rocker cover. Remove the cap screw on the exhaust side of the hold-down clamp that holds the injector in position. Remove hold-down clamp. Notice the third bolt is not removed. The injector cannot be removed with the fuel connector in position due to the contact between the mating surfaces of the connector and injector. Remove the high-pressure fuel line for the injector. Install the connector puller and pull the fuel connector out of the cylinder head. Thread the injector puller screw to the top of the injector. Tighten the nut on the puller to remove the injector. Clean the injector nozzle bore with an injector bore brush and remove the debris from the bore. Make sure to remove the injector sealing washer. Inspect the bore to be sure that only one washer was installed. More than one washer changes the injector protrusion into the cylinder and will cause the injector to not align properly with the fuel connector. Check the fitting on the injector to be sure it is not damaged, is providing adequate seal for the fuel connector. Check the flare fitting on the end of the connector for signs of a good sealing surface. Make sure the contact pattern on the end of the connector runs around the entire connector. Install a new O-ring on the injector body. Assemble the new copper sealing washer on the injector, making certain to use the correct sealing washer for the engine CPL. Only install one sealing washer. The current ISB engine utilizes a 1.5 mm sealing washer. Applying a light coat of engine oil between the washer and injector helps to hold the washer in position during installation. Apply a light coat of oil to the O-ring. Make sure that the fuel connection seat is oriented toward the fuel connection and place the injector into the bore and seat the injector. Slip the slotted side of the hold-down clamp under the shoulder bolt and into the offset groove in the top of the injector. Install the remaining hold-down clamp bolt and torque the bolt to 89 inch-pounds. Install a new O-ring on the connector. Lubricate the O-ring and slide the fuel connection into the bore. Seat the connector. Install the high-pressure supply line and torque the fitting to the proper specification. Over-torquing is connection can cause a leak to occur at the injector-to-connector seat. To complete the installation, install the reusable rock cover gasket and rocker cover. After proper troubleshooting procedures have been performed, it may become necessary to replace the fuel pump. There are 5 fault codes that do not require additional troubleshooting before replacing the fuel pump. Remove the front access cover on the front gear housing cover. Remove the mounting nut holding the fuel pump drive shaft to the fuel pump drive gear. Bar the engine until the key of fuel pump drive shaft keyway is at 12 o'clock position. Although the exact position is not important, having the key on the top side helps to prevent dropping it into the engine during fuel pump removal and installation. Using the gear puller, pull the fuel pump gear loose from the drive shaft. Remove the electrical connector from the FPCM by sliding out the lock until the hole appears. Take the low-pressure supply line loose from the connection at the fuel filter. Loosen the low-pressure fuel line connection to the fuel pump to allow the line to be moved slightly during pump full. This line will be removed from the engine with the fuel injection pump. Remove the drain line connection and the overflow valve from the fuel injection pump. Remove the air intake heater from the intake manifold to provide access to the fuel line connections behind the heater. Cover the intake hole to prevent any debris from entering the intake manifold. The rigidity and internal dimension of the high-pressure fuel line is essential to proper engine operation. Be careful not to bend or otherwise damage the fuel line during service. Remove the bolts holding the high-pressure fuel line supports to the cylinder head. Disconnect the fuel lines from the cylinder head. Use a wrench to keep the delivery valve holders from turning and remove the high-pressure fuel lines for cylinders 1, 2, and 4 from the rear of the pump. Remove the high-pressure fuel lines. Remove the remaining high-pressure fuel line from the fuel injection pump and remove the second set of high-pressure fuel lines from the engine. Remove the bolt holding the fuel pump to the support bracket. Remove nuts from the fuel pump mounting studs. Remove the pump from the engine, taking care not to drop the key in the fuel pump drive shaft. Before installing the new fuel injection pump, clean the oil from the gear taper. Clean the drive shaft of the fuel pump. Rotate the pump drive shaft so that the keyway in the shaft is approximately in the 12 o'clock position. Each fuel pump drive gear key is matched to the fuel pump. Only a key with the correct number provides for the correct fuel pump static timing. The number for the fuel pump drive gear key is stamped on the data pad located on the outboard side of the fuel pump. This number is also stamped on the top surface of the key. When installing a new fuel pump, the arrow on the drive shaft key must face towards the fuel pump housing. Using the keyed shaft simplifies timing procedure by allowing the pump to be installed with the engine rotated to any engine position as long as the fuel pump drive gear is properly timed to the camshaft. Although each pump is originally supplied with a key specific for that pump, if the key is damaged or lost, a service key is available. Orient the service key as previously described. Make sure the key is a tight fit in the pump shaft. If the engine is equipped with an air compressor, the low-pressure fuel line must be installed onto the fuel pump before installing the pump to the engine. Lubricate the gear cover housing and the O-ring on the injection pump with clean engine oil. Carefully align the key with the slot in the gear and install the fuel pump. Install the fuel pump driver spring washer and mounting nut. Hand tighten to seat the gear on the shaft. Install the fuel pump mounting nuts. Install the bolt in the fuel pump's port bracket. Torque the fuel pump drive gear nut to 120 foot-pounds. Install the access cover. Install the rear set of high-pressure fuel lines. Hand tighten connections at the cylinder head and torque the lines to 18 foot-pounds at the fuel injection pump. Install the front lines in the same manner. Cylinder number 2 fuel line must be torqued to 25 foot-pounds before the air heater is installed. Install the bolts through the brackets holding the high-pressure fuel line to the cylinder head. Install the intake manifold heater. Install the fuel return line and overflow valve on the fuel pump. Connect the low-pressure fuel line to the fuel filter and torque it to the proper specification. Tighten the low-pressure fuel line to the injection pump. Push the engine harness section onto the FPCM and slide the lock into position to hold connector in place. Bleed the low and high-pressure fuel lines as described in the segment on bleeding the air from the system. Tighten the high-pressure fuel lines. The current torque is 25 foot-pounds, but refer to the latest service literature for updated specifications. High-pressure fuel leaks can cause poor engine performance. With the engine running, move a piece of white cardboard around high-pressure fuel fittings. Spray on cardboard indicates cracks in the fuel line or leak in the fitting. When checking for high-pressure fuel leaks, be careful not to allow the spray to contact your skin. Fuel pressure in the line is high enough to penetrate skin and cause serious injury. For the low-pressure portion of the fuel system, we will look at air in the fuel system, zero the transducer, fuel inlet restriction, fuel inlet pressure, pressure drop across filter, fuel lift pump screen. Click on the section that you want to learn about. Check for air being pulled into the fuel system. One method of checking for an air leak into the fuel system is by installing a sight glass on the low-pressure fuel line on the inlet side of the lift pump. Start the engine and watch the sight glass for excessive air in the fuel supply. You can also check for air in the low-pressure side of the fuel system by installing a quick connect fitting in the test port of the fuel filter. Attach a quick connect, clear plastic tubing, and a needle valve to this connection. Place the end of the clear plastic hose in a bucket. Start and operate the engine at high idle. Slowly open the needle valve. Air in the low-pressure side of the fuel system will flow up to the filter head and out of the engine through the plastic tubing. By watching for bubbles in this fuel flow, you can determine if air is being pulled into the system. If there is air in the fuel system, locate the source of the air and repair or replace the leaking component. Before making any checks with the digital multimeter and pressure transducer adapter, you must first zero the adapter. Begin by setting the dial on the digital multimeter to the 300 millivolt scale. the meter into the adapter, aligning the red leg with the appropriate port on the multimeter. With the pressure transducer adapter turned off, read the battery voltage. The voltage must be greater than 100 millivolts. Install a quick connect fitting to the end of the hose on the adapter to vent the hose. Set the adapter to the desired scale. Zero the meter by turning the knob on the adapter until the meter displays 0. Remove the quick connect fitting. The meter is now ready for use. Next, we need to check to be sure that the fuel pump is receiving an adequate supply of fuel. Install an adapter at the inlet side of the lift pump. Start the engine. With the engine running at high idle, check the fuel inlet restriction. The inlet restriction must not exceed 6 inches of mercury. If there is an inlet restriction, inspect the fuel supply lines, filters, and tank for any damage that might cause the restriction. When the inlet restriction is within specification and no air is in the fuel system, check the outlet pressure from the lift pump. Connect the gauge to the quick connect at the fuel filter inlet. During cranking, the lift pump must produce no more than 7 psi. With the engine running at low idle, the lift pump must deliver a minimum of 10 psi. If the fuel pump is not supplying an adequate pressure, remove and inspect the inlet screen in the lift pump. However, this screen is not very accessible and should only be removed for cleaning when testing indicates that there is a fuel flow problem. Disconnect the harness from the fuel lift pump. Disconnect the low-pressure fuel lines from the pump. Remove mounting bolts and remove the pump from the bracket. While holding the lift pump in an upright position, remove top cap. Take care not to disturb the vanes in the transfer pump. Remove the screen from the lift pump and clean the screen. In addition to the quick connect fitting installed in the inlet port of the fuel filter, install the quick connect fitting at the M10 outlet port on the fuel filter and connect the gauge. The inlet pressure at the fuel injection pump must be 5 psi or greater. Compare the reading at the end of the filter to the reading at the filter outlet to determine the pressure drop across the filter. The pressure drop across the filter must be no greater than 5 psi. If the pressure drop across the filter is too great, replace the filter. Not only will a pressure drop greater than 5 psi reduce engine power and fuel flow, but it also greatly reduces the filter's ability to separate water from the fuel. Water in the fuel reduces the lubricating ability of the fuel. Therefore, VP44 fuel pump damage will occur. To determine if an injector is operating properly, injectors are tested for opening pressure or pop pressure, chatter, spray pattern, and leakage. Install the injector in the adapter for the injector nozzle tester, making sure to align the fuel connection on the injector with the opening for the fuel connection. Install the fuel connection in the adapter. Install and torque the fuel line to hold the fuel connector and injector in position and connect injector to the fuel supply. Select the test that you want to learn about. To check an injector for opening or pop pressure, open the valve on the tester and slowly operate the lever to build pressure in the injector. Watch the pressure gauge. When the needle valve moves off of its seat and injection begins, the reading on the pressure gauge will drop. The maximum gauge reading is the injector opening pressure. Compare this pressure reading to the specification stamped on the side of the injector body. The actual opening pressure must be at least 90% of the specified value, but no more than 8 bar higher than this value. The chatter test verifies the ability of the needle to move freely and properly atomize the fuel. Close the valve and operate the handle on the tester. The injector reaches its opening pressure, you should hear the valve open. The sound is the needle opening and closing. While checking the chatter, observe the spray pattern. It may be necessary to increase the pumping speed to obtain a good spray pattern. All of the holes in the nozzle should be open and producing a uniform pattern of atomized fuel. ISB injectors are installed in the center of the cylinder. With the injector in this position, the holes in the nozzle provide a uniform spray coming from the nozzle in each direction. To perform a leakage test, open the valve on the tester. Operate the lever to hold pressure at 20 bar below the opening pressure. No drops of fuel should fall from the tip of the injector within 10 seconds. If the injector does not pass all of these tests, it must be repaired or replaced. Refer to the ISB troubleshooting and repair manual for complete repair procedure.